Let's continue our Illinois football position previews, and we feel like this is a pretty good timing on this one as we're going to preview the tight ends and wide receivers. Welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast. It's Jeremy Werner and Joey Wagner. And Joey, these are the skill positions, and these are two very newsworthy ones right now. As a tight end, Illinois loses one of its top players at the position, Cole Rusk, out with a season-ending knee injury that he suffered last week. And then a wide receiver, of course, I just wrote a story about Zakhari Franklin and the buzz he is building on campus right now since he has arrived in the summer. So good timing on both of these. But for Luke Altmaier to take a step forward, we know the offensive line has to be better. We know the run game has to be better. But he's got to throw to some people. And Illinois lost Tip Ryman, Isaiah Williams, Casey Washington. So they got a lot of production to replace.
Yeah, there's big shoes to fill there. And especially in the wide receiver room, seems to be a lot of excitement building around. I think Brett Bielema said yesterday at media days that these wide receivers are playing as well as that position room has played since he's been there, which something, you'd like to see to follow up given the talent that he's had in that room during his tenure. But obviously with guys like Pat Bryant, with Zakhari Franklin, Malik Elzy, we'll get in obviously to some of the guys that are maybe lesser known, that Kenari Wilcher, who will have a big role this season. There's talent in that room, Jeremy, and former coach George McDonald did a heck of a job recruiting talent to that room. Justin Stepp kept that talent when he got to Illinois and kind of a heavy transfer portal part of the calendar. So now it's time to see if they can go out there and help this offense take a step forward.
Absolutely. But let's start at tight end because the storyline now is how do you replace Cole Rusk? We don't know what Cole Rusk would have done, what his production would have been, but he was a big part of what this tight end group was going to be because he just gave them something they haven't really had here in recent years, which is a 6'5", 250-pound, tall, athletic, dynamic pass catcher who was an FCS All-American last year at Murray State and really his first year of college experience. But the Rock Island kid comes home, going to be a big part of replacing Tip Ryman, and then unfortunately suffers a torn ACL. So I feel for him. I feel for his family because they were so excited for this. And to be on the precipice of it, you just feel for the kid. But these happen. It always happens that a key injury seems to happen before the season during training camp because it's football. And that is the importance of depth. But he was going to play a big role here, Joey. I don't know if that's 20 catches, 30 catches, how many touchdowns. But to lose him, this tight end room takes a big hit. So how do they replace it is my big storyline.
Yeah, it's a huge story. And as you were talking, the Mackey Award watch list came out today, and Cole Rusk was on that. And we talked about that with the running backs. He was clearly nominated for that. They were excited to get him. And it's really, Jeremy, we thought he was going to provide a pass-catching option, a downfield option that really Illinois hasn't had since Daniel Barker in 2019 to 2021, and then Lou Dorsey for the season before that in 2017. So, yeah, I mean, it was clear they wanted to add downfield options, and they had him and they had Carson Goda, who we'll get into. But now you're looking at guys like your Tanner Arkins, your Henry Boyers, your Carson Godas. So to me, seem like the three main players to step into bigger roles and replace him. But Arkin and Boyer haven't shown the downfield threat that Cole Rusk has shown. And Goda's a little undersized, and it's a big transfer for him coming up from Division II. So there's questions in that room. I mean, I think they've got a lot of bodies, but we need to see that start to develop on the field and statistically and productive, and both in the pass catching game and the blocking game.
It's probably worth going back to that Tip Ryman was a heck of a player. And he's a hell of a blocker. We all know that. But he wasn't the most productive pass catcher. And I still think he's got to prove a lot about that in the NFL game. But Arizona Cardinals drafted him because he's going to block. And he's going to play special teams. And he's going to be a culture guy. And he's going to hang around the NFL for a really long time because of his work ethic. And what he became, from a walk-on from South Dakota into replacing Luke Ford as the starter and becoming a third-round draft pick. He's a self-made man. But they don't have a ton of passing game production to replace, but they clearly thought they needed more of it. And adding, a guy like Cole Rusk, a 4-star transfer prospect, and adding Carson Goda to help replace Griffin Moore, who's another guy that had 15 catches last year. So just a ton of production. And Tanner Arkin, as good as he was blocking at times last year, he's closer to 6'3", in my opinion, and had one catch for 1 yard. last season. Henry Boyer, big target, 6'7", close to 265, 270 pounds. Bart Miller probably have to keep him away from getting him to play left tackle, right? Like that's how big and physical Henry Boyer is. And we know the coaches say he's more athletic than he's given credit for. And I agree with that, but he's still not a proven pass catcher at this level. So do they have that? I don't know. Can Carson Goda at 6, he looks closer to 6'2", doesn't he? I mean, you stood next to him.
Yeah.
6'2", 235 pounds. Can he replace him? Maybe we'll get into Nate Gwynn here in a little bit. He looks the most like Cole Rusk from a physical perspective, but is he ready? That's a big question mark I have. So, yeah, for me, I don't know if they have a guy that can replace Cole Rusk, and it just means everybody else is going to have to step up their game. Or Joey, there's not going to get a lot of passing game production out of the tight ends. That's most likely.
And I think Brett Bielema, he didn't say that directly, but when you asked him about replacing Cole Rusk yesterday, he talked about obviously the leadership, and Cole was an older guy. And then he kind of pivoted a little bit, Jeremy, to the wide receiver room and started talking about that. And, maybe I misinterpreted him, but I think when you're asked about the tight ends and you immediately pivot to another group of pass catchers, that leads me to think that maybe the dreams that you had of targeting downfield tight ends have to be put on pause for the time being because of this injury. And I just don't, you're right. I don't know if there's anyone in there who can replace him. And it's interesting. I thought you brought up a good point. We're not talking about replacing Ryman, right? We're talking about replacing this idea that they had to enhance the offense of a more, downfield option. So there's no apples to apples. Okay, you've got to replace Tip Ryman like this because he didn't have that downfield stuff. And I think given what he did as a pass catcher, if we're talking just as a pass catcher, I think you can find a way to come close to what he was able to do in terms of his production, in terms of his depth. Blocking, obviously, he was so good at. But you just kind of thought that this position had a chance to take a step forward and to really enhance the offense in that position. And now, will they be able to do that? I don't know, man. I don't know. And it's a tough time with the group of 2026 tight end target or prospects who would probably like to see some statistical production out of that position, if I had to guess.
Yeah, and I want to get into this conversation a little bit later about this position and where it's at now and in the long term. But for me, like, you're going to replace Ryman in the aggregate as a blocker, right? The Tanner Arkin was in 12 personnel last year. He was basically a 12 personnel starter by the end of last year, getting a lot of reps. He is a physical blocker. I think he's going to be good there. Henry Boyer, I think he's got great potential as a blocker. And I think those two combined can give you a lot of the physicality and, blocking on the edge that you lost with Ryman. Maybe not to his ability quite yet, but long-term and in the season, I think they can replace some of that. But the great part about when you have a great tight end is they can do both those things. And while Ryman wasn't a great receiver, I thought he was a more capable receiver than we've seen from Arkin or Boyer so far, and a far more capable blocker than we knew Cole Rusk to be or Carson Goda to be. So now we've talked about this with receivers before, Joey. Are you going to be signaling to your defense what you're running based on your personnel groups? Like when Boyer and Arkin are there, can you really catch them by surprise?
Can you convince them you're going to throw the ball to the tight end?
Correct. They have to be some kind of threat. And that's what I have a big question about right now is that they don't have that type of talent for me that we've seen. Because Cole Rusk wasn't a strong blocker, but he's a willing one. And I think he could block well enough to where that defenses are guessing a little bit. I don't know if defenses are going to be guessing with whichever tight ends are on the field right now.
No, I don't either. And now we should say a lot of this when we talk about this, we're talking about like those downfield, those 10 plus, 15 plus yard type things. I think they can be capable in some of those drop off passes to the flat, and they're strong and they can move better than you would think. And they can pick up a handful of yards on that. But again,
red zone, I think they'll be fine. I think Henry Boyer could be really good in the red zone, and we saw Arkin catch a touchdown pass last year.
I'm actually pulling up Tip Ryman. Just to give you a reference, Tip Ryman, obviously the most productive pass catcher. He had 24 targets last season, and 19 of those came in short yardage, 0 to 9 yard thing like that. You wanted to see it's clear the way they recruited that they were looking for more of that 10 to 19 yard range. I'm pulling up Griffin Moore here in a second. That's just where
he's a guy that got more of those intermediate targets, right? I'm thinking the Kansas game. He was a guy that, injuries really hurt him, but in that game, it felt like, oh, maybe he can be a 25 to 30 catch guy.
9 of his 18 targets came of 10 or more yards last season. He really did hit that intermediate, and I think that's something they were targeting again this year, and to enhance that a little bit more. So there still can be production in terms of those short passes, very valuable, like red zone. I think that's still very much on the table. It's just you saw the next level that they wanted to get to.
All right, I want to take a minute to tell you about Home Field Apparel because they are the premium collegiate apparel brand, and they're based in nearby Indianapolis. Home Field sent me a few shirts, and what I love about them is, of course, they have incredibly comfortable, well-fitting shirts, but they also have officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs, and they have more than 180 plus available colleges, including, yes, your Illinois Fighting Illini. They have great gear for the upcoming football season, so for the warm weather games, check out their Script Illini t-shirt, the Orange Ringer tee, the vintage Oski Wawa helmet, or for the fall chillier games, check out the Script Illini hoodie, the Flying Illini hoodie, the Flying Illini quarter zip, and if they're still available, you might want to check out homefieldapparel.com for this. Check out their Script Bomber jacket. It is awesome. Also, don't miss their Can't Miss Kickoff 2024 campaign. So Homefield is giving away these special football boxes, and these platinum VIP boxes include 3 never-before-seen items from your school that are not available anywhere else. They're curated so fans have new gear to wear all season long, suitable for all weather conditions. And these platinum boxes also include other exclusive items, including a new hat or ringer, a VIP koozie, and a 2024 Platinum Pass, which guarantees 20% off and early access to your school's football releases through the 2024 season. The football boxes are available on August 9th, so these will sell out quick, so go check them out. Go to homefieldapparel.com to check out their great selection of Illini gear and use code Illini24, that's all capitals, Illini24 for 15% off. That's Illini24 for 15% off at homefieldapparel.com. X Factor, who are you going with in this group?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it kind of has to be Henry Boyer because I like so much about what he does, what he looks like, the physicality, the size. I do think, and we've heard, I know I've said it before on here, and people are probably tired of hearing it, but like we have heard with a genuine sense of honesty that he moves better than people give him credit for. I've heard it twice or maybe 3 times around this offseason, and like that's real when you hear that, but how much better? Like, right? Like what, I don't know what, every opinion on what he moves like is probably different from one person to the next, but like how well does he move? How much can he replace some level of what you would hope to have gotten?
The guy he reminds me of, and this is going back a little bit, so Joey, I don't think you covered him at all, but Evan Wilson, who Ron Zook recruited, was known as a big blocker, but he was 6'6", 250, better blocker, but he was a guy that could give you 10 catches a year, give you some touchdown threats. Like over his career, only 27 catches for 300 yards, but he had 8 touchdowns. Like that's what I think of with Henry Boyer. Can he be that kind of guy that by the end of the year gives you 12 to 15 catches, but 3 or 4 of them are touchdown catches. Plus he's a really good blocker. I think they need that because I do think Tanner Arkin could be the dump off guy by the end of the year, might be 20 catches for 170 yards or something like that.
Michael Marquez like.
Yeah, something like that. But they need somebody that can be more of a red zone target, bigger body that Luke Altmaier can throw to and trust that he can go get the ball. So more of the big blocker, but the other guy here is Carson Goda, just because he is a dynamic pass catcher. And boy, that addition looks big right now. I don't know how he translates from Division II to the Big Ten. I don't think he's going to be much of a blocking presence because he is 6'2", 235 pounds, but he's a natural receiver. So maybe he's more of an H-back type, but they could use that in this room. And if he can be a guy that can, motion, find ways to get him open, I do think he's a guy that can make some plays after the catch and be more of a reliable receiver than these other options. So more pressure today on Henry Boyer and Carson Goda.
Yeah, for Carson Goda, it's not as much. Can he move? Can he catch the ball? I think we know that. It's can you hold? Like, can you take that big jump? Like, we're not talking. We've seen guys make the JUCO jump, right? The group of 5 jump to some level, the FCS jump. Like, this is a big jump from Division II all the way up, especially when you're not built like a Big Ten Division I player, right? Like a Big Ten tight end. I think that those are a couple things that he's got to prove, and maybe he will. Like, I don't know. He told me yesterday, and we tried to cover what this would mean for the tight end room, Jeremy. He told me yesterday he's trying to show he's got that mental strength to him, that toughness about him, I believe is how he phrased it as I scroll through to find it here. And I said, well, how do you do that? Because certainly you probably don't have a lot of interest of, getting very physical in practice right now, especially as this room, he's talking just like that extra strain, like really pushing through it to show like clearly it feels like he's got to prove to people he can be here if he wants to show that. So he's a wild card. I would still say Boyer because I like physically a little bit more of what he brings, but those two guys have got to step into a role that, kind of like we talked about with Pat Bryant, we will talk about, or with Malik Elzy, and we will talk about like maybe this would have been a good year for Henry Boyer to be that third guy, to be that blocker who can get a couple. Now he's, to me, very clearly the second guy, the second tight end behind Tanner Arkin here. Maybe we're not talking enough about Tanner Arkin. I think I still have to see it just in the sense of some of that pass catching value, that downfield value. But he's a guy they've been really, really effusive in their praise. This dates back to the spring and maybe even last year. Robbie Disher is really, really encouraged by Tanner Arkin and what he can bring.
It's just see it. What is the upside? Like, I think I know the floor is the highest in that room right now because he can block. He knows what he's doing. He's a veteran. He's got experience. But can he be a big play threat? I don't see that. But there's going to be a lot of I don't want to overlook the value of Tanner Arkin because you do need some reliability as a blocker and somebody who knows what the offense is doing. But you also need some upside, and you lost a lot of that with Cole Rusk. I do want to mention the other guy. I don't know if he's your answer for the next question, Joey, but Nate Gwynn is really interesting because he's 6'6", 245 pounds, was basically a wide receiver in high school, right? And he athletically is what looks like Cole Rusk, right?
He wears 82 and looks like Luke Ford. Not as built, yeah. But you associate number. Like he looks a hell of a lot better this fall camp than he did a year ago.
Yeah, he came in, 215, something like that. He's 245. He looks the part of a Big Ten tight end. It's just, is he ready for this? And he had some early growing pains, as most freshmen do. Didn't play in a game last year. So he's kind of the wild card of the group because he's got the measurables. I just don't know what kind of football player he is right now.
Yeah, I don't either. But if you look at him physically and you think, okay, I could see where that would work, right? I could see where he's got some of those tools. And look, Illinois took him in the class of 2023, I think with the understanding he was going to be a development guy, which in fairness, unless you're one of the top 5 tight ends in the country, that position lends itself to a lot of development guys. So in an ideal world, you'd have him kind of waiting another year, maybe 2. But could he be a guy who pushes his way into that because he does have that? He's got the size that Goda doesn't have, and he's got the receiving value we think that an Arkin or a Boyer maybe don't have in terms of that intermediate area. So like he's got some of that working for him, but he hasn't played in the game. And it's a big adjustment to go from a scout team guy, a guy deep on the depth chart, to a guy they're counting on in a season that's a big season. And if he can make any sort of jump into that, the door's open for him, right? Like this would seem to me like a very good opportunity sits there for him to try to find his way into that top 3 of the rotation.
He's going to get more reps than he's ever had now. So we'll see if he can take advantage of it. All right. Most intriguing long-term prospect at this position. Who you got, Joey?
I feel like I know who you're going to take.
I could take either freshman. So.
Yeah. One walk-on, one scholarship, right? That's kind of what we're looking at here. I'm going to go with Hollinger because Tanner Hollinger, the freshman, he played 8-man football a year ago. There's a lot of tools there. Right. But he's raw. And he told me like had to adjust to the speed. And you're kind of getting hit twice if you're him. Right. You got to adjust to the speed of 11-man football. And then, oh, by the way, you've got to adjust to the speed of being in the Big Ten. And like that's a lot. And that's why I think, like most tight ends, kind of tuck him away for 12, 18, 24 months and see what comes out after that, after he's been in kind of that workout chamber, that scout team chamber. But he put up good numbers, and it's 8-man. So I know a lot of people are maybe it's hard to translate what that looks like if in a different 11-man football. But I think there's a lot there, Jeremy. They like him. They like his upside. it takes time. And I thought Barry Lunny, I think it was Barry Lunny on one of the signing day podcasts, said, look, with tight ends, you either get someone who can catch or you get someone who can block, and then you got to teach them basically the other side of being a tight end. And I think Hollinger's got a little bit of both in that conversation, but you've got to enhance all of that to a big degree given the jump he's making.
Really long, really physical, and he does have some hands. Like, he was a man amongst boys at 8-man football in the middle of Nebraska. Now he's playing against a bunch of men. Like, he's going to go up in the scout team against Gabe Ackus and Seth Coleman, right? So this is going to be a trial by fire for him for the next, as you said, 12 to 24 months. But yeah, he's a long-term project. He's going to take some time, and they know that, but they're excited about his upside, that he might have a little bit of Tip Ryman to him, right? Just the work ethic, the demeanor. But the guy who might be more ready to play, even though he's a walk-on, is Jake Furtney out of St. Charles North. Played big school football in the Chicago suburbs. 6'4", 235. Does need to add some strength, but he played defensive line. His brother plays at Purdue. And so there's good bloodlines here. I thought he was worthy of a scholarship. I think he's going to probably be on one by next year, even if it's a half scholarship or whatever it is moving forward with the 105-man roster. But I just think he's a legit Power 5 developmental prospect, but I do think he's a more natural early play guy because I think he can play special teams, and I think he's kind of built a little bit bigger than Tanner Arkin, but I feel like they can be similar kind of prospects. Just a really good football player. I saw him at a camp a year and a half ago during the summer. I was like, oh, this kid, I'm going to keep an eye on him. And then Illinois, late in the process, he was committed to one of the service academies, and they're able to steal him away as preferred walk-on. So I thought it was one of the best PWO gets they got last year. So I'm just interested. Talking with people in the program, they think he is more ready to play than Tanner Hollinger, and they're excited about adding him to the program. So I just think, is he ultimately the number one guy? I'd rather him be a complimentary guy, but I think he can help Illinois down the line.
Yeah, I agree. It's a really good walk-on get. And as you mentioned, and with this everything changing here in the next 8 months, 12 months, he won't be a walk-on for long. Those are the guys that you want to get. Like, if you're flipping either FCS or Service Academy or MAC guys, trying to get them to come in here as a preferred walk-on, that sign of a healthy walk-on program, first of all. And those are guys who end up in 2 years, maybe in the case of Furtney before that, I don't know, but those are end up guys in 2 years that ultimately are on scholarship or ultimately find themselves in that two deep. This isn't the comparison I want to make in terms of what I think Jake Furtney will be, but your Tip Rymans, like Miles what Scott. Were we saying? Miles Scott's, right? Like, what were we saying about those guys when they got like, okay, good get, you flipped them from, insert school and now they're here. And they end up being big parts of what you're doing there. That doesn't always mean NFL like Tip Ryman, right? But it means productive, serviceable football players in the Big Ten. And in a lot of ways, walk-ons are recruiting erasers, right? Probably that need has gone away a little bit with the transfer portal hitting what it has. That's kind of been how they've thought of collectively. And he's a guy who fits that bill.
Ryan Mead is a contributor to you on special teams, gives you depth at linebacker. So there's another guy that's a sign of what it can do. All right, depth chart, pretty easy. Tanner Arkin, starter, and then it's Carson Goda and Henry Boyer in the mix. I think Henry Boyer would be the 12 personnel guy, no doubt about it, and Carson Goda could potentially be that split out guy. But I think you might see more one tight end sets than two tight end sets now with Cole Rusk's injury here, Joe.
Yeah, especially that combined with what the injury and what that receiver room, kind of some of the options that they feel comfortable with. I think those two things play into that. With that, and you mentioned it, I just very much worry about tipping your hand with who you have out there. Like, until I see that not be like a prevalent issue, I'm going to wonder how that's going to play out, because there are very obvious tip your hand candidates in that room. And I just think you've got to find a way to balance that. And I feel like Boyer's probably the better bet to balance that. So he's got to go out and do it.
All right. Expectations for this group.
They've changed in 24 hours, right?
Yeah, I'll just say it. If we're doing position rankings for Illinois football, my confidence in this position group being a difference maker is the lowest among all positions, but especially on the offense. Because a wide receiver, we'll talk about it. There's some tantalizing upside. Quarterback, we know what they got in the starter. Running back, you got playmakers and depth, you feel like, and then offensive line, the depth has improved. This feels like a weak point of the team after Cole Rusk gets injured. And I feel like you have one of the bottom groups in the Big Ten. Now, maybe Henry Boyer can break out. Maybe Tanner Arkin is better than we think. But on paper, this does not look like a group of strength now with Cole Rusk injured.
No, it doesn't. And it's hard because I agree with everything that you said. It's just what they wanted it to be in the way that they added this offseason. Like that's where the disconnect. I think they'll be fine as blocking in the run game.
Yeah.
I think they'll be fine as helping out as pass pro. I think they'll be fine in some of those short yardage things as we've discussed. But it's lower in terms of being impact because you saw what they wanted that position to evolve into this year. And that's where, until you see it, you just can't project that to be a reality for this team. And there's just a lot. I mean, because that's a position that requires a lot of development, you kind of got this gap a little bit from your third-year Henry Boyers, your Tanner Arkin, who's now in his second season with the program and who's been around college football when he was at Colorado State, your Carson Goda. And then it's a lot of guys that are still kind of new to this whole thing, right? Who are a year or two in the program that you miss Griffin Moore right now. He's a guy with his age. He's been around, his pass catching value. I mean, I would have bumped him up to number 2 right now on the depth chart, or 1A, 1B alongside Tanner Arkin.
I think if he knew Cole Rusk was injured, he might not have left, right? Like if this would have happened in the spring, would he have left? Where's it? North Texas?
Texas State.
So yeah, that would have been nice to have. Now maybe Carson.
And to be clear, like you can't blame him for that decision he made. He had 1 year left. He's shown a little bit. He wants to go be productive in college football.
Yeah. So I mean, I kind of threw these numbers out, but like I think a realistic expectations for some of these guys would be: can Tanner Arkin get 20 catches for 170 yards and a couple touchdowns? Can Henry Boyer be a 10 to 15 catch guy, right, and get a couple touchdowns? Can Goda do what Griffin Moore did and give you 12 to 15 catches for, a little more than 10 yards per catch? Like, I think it's got to be a committee approach here. I don't think you're going to have one guy that's like a 40 catch guy among this group, unless you really get surprised. That's kind of my realistic expectations. I just don't expect this to be a playmaking group based on what we haven't seen so far. And there's just not a lot of experience in this group. So again, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a tough-nosed, physical blocking group. It's not going to be what they hoped it was going to be in the passing game. They're not going to take a huge step forward there. And I do think they're going to have to change how they kind of plan to use the tight end group and potentially use more 3 wide out sets and more 1 tight end sets.
I'm going to put you on the spot. We didn't talk about this, so sorry.
Yeah.
Leading receiver of the tight ends, who do you have, and what would you set the over-under on receptions at going into the season?
For the leading receiver?
For the leading receiver.
I'd still go Arkin just because of playing time, right? I just think he's going to play 60, 70% of the snaps, maybe, but 60 probably is a good guess for him at least. And I just think there's going to be rollouts, play action, and he's going to get some opportunities. 17 and a half? Like I said, 20 is a good realistic goal, but is that 17 and a half, 18 and a half, something like that?
Ryman had 19 last year.
Right.
Yeah, I would. It'd be a good number. 17 and a half, I feel like, is the best number here.
Yeah.
What would you have set it at for Rusk?
Oh, I don't know if it's that much higher. Because I just wondered how many snaps he would get, but he was going to get targets. Like when he was in the game, he was going to get way higher target percentage than any of these guys.
I like 22 and a half for him would have made sense.
Yeah, maybe it was like 20 and a half, 21 and a half or something like that. But you just feel like, okay, Cole Rusk, we're talking about 12, 13 yards per catch. Tanner Arkin, I'm thinking like 8, 9, something like that, right?
On the high end, probably.
Yeah, it's a different kind of target for each of those guys. And I'll just say this, for the long term of this position, they need to win bigger recruitments. Like Cole Rusk was a big win for them because they just hadn't won big recruitments yet. And this is a position that Brett Bielema's had a lot of success. Barry Lunny's had a lot of success at Arkansas. And Tip Ryman was a heck of a success. So this position, they just need to win more big recruitments. They don't have anybody in the class of 2025. They didn't seem to really like that any of those guys were going to be difference makers that they were looking at. They're certainly shooting high in 2026. And JC Anderson at Mount Zion is probably Joey and I's number one target on the board of this is a big recruitment. You're going against Michigan, Penn State, Notre Dame, the SEC, but you have Braden Trimble here. You have a good connection with that family, but at the same time, what are you selling from a tight end perspective? Tip Ryman you can sell, but this year you felt like Cole Rusk could be a big part of that sell, and now you're not able to do that. The one upside of Cole Rusk being out for the season, you can get a medical red shirt and have 2 years of eligibility remaining, so he can be your guy in 2025 and 2026. But they need to up the talent in this room because Cole Rusk, Henry Boyer, I feel good about. Furtney and Hollinger have upside, but I think that's down the line. They got to keep raising the bar for talent in this group because it's a position they just haven't won big battles yet.
No, and I thought in 25 early on there were some targets out there that they really liked, and the board didn't fall their way. Those guys committed elsewhere, and then became a situation of not just taking a tight end to take a tight end. At least that's the read I had on it. But J.C. Anderson's recruitment's huge. It's huge. I rent a house in Mount Zion. Multiple people on it. Like you've got that's a huge one to win. Given everything that you mentioned, given the need at that, but it is a hard sell. Like if you're J.C. Anderson and you've got the top 10 that you had, which includes your Oregons, your Penn States, your Wisconsin, or your Michigans, your Notre Dames, Texas, Auburn. Like there's more to sell there in terms of some of that tight end production. And if you're J.C. Anderson, that's probably a big factor for you. Is how are tight ends being used at the top 10 schools that you have, and that's where this does hurt. I'm not saying it's the end all be all, right? Like that's unfair to put one thing on a recruitment like that. But sure doesn't hurt to have a tight end productive, right?
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing: like people bring up Tip Ryman, they're like, "Well, he didn't even produce in this offense because we don't target the tight ends." This has been the thing about Illinois for 12 to 15 years, right? Is they've had some guys that gone to the NFL that didn't, Matt Lacoste and Jeff Cumberland that didn't get targeted a lot. Not Iowa's a different realm. Penn State is a different realm. Wisconsin's had some tight end production, but Illinois just hasn't made it a go-to target, right? And wide receivers they have this year should help you, that they don't need to be that top target. But to get some of those top players, yes, you produced a draft pick, but people do point to Tip Ryman only have 19 catches last year. Why didn't he get more at Illinois? That's what other recruiters will say. So yeah, it's when can they break through all of that? You felt like Cole Rusk gave you the opportunity this year, and then he gets injured. So it's just a tough spot to be as you're trying to sell that, because you could sell playing time, you could sell Tip Ryman development, but people want to see receptions and more than just one guy in the NFL.
That's right. And, you got to recruit. There's negative recruiting, right? Like that's just college football. And especially when you're in the market for top 247 kids, 4 stars, I think he's ranked number 2 at his position in the class of 2026 behind Dunlap's Max Suter, or maybe definitely the top 4, I think is the best way to say that. So, yeah, they got to break through or show that you can develop the hell out of these kids. But ideally, you'd like to see them break through and get a guy who doesn't require that long of a developmental plan.
Hey, guys, fall is right around the corner. That means kids back at school. That means the schedules get a little busier. And that's why there's no better time to check out Factor. Fuel up for all these busy days with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for the fall with a great menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. And Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. So make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? With 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore, and you can crush your wellness goals with dietitian-approved meals and ingredients that you can trust. Make your day delicious, too, from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options, and you get to keep your kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. So enjoy effortless support for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. So head to factormeals.com/Illini50 and use code Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code Illini50 at factormeals.com/Illini50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. All right, Joey, let's get into the wide receivers where look at Illinois.
A different tone here.
All of a sudden, all Big Ten first team selection, the first in 12 years, a draft pick at the position for the first time in 12 years. It's a Big Ten program. And Isaiah Williams had a great first game in the, what am I thinking of?
Preseason, 4 receptions for 35 yards, showed some of the moves that we've seen him make for years now at Illinois, and that's good for Isaiah Williams. It's a small tangent.
Great to see. But Casey Washington, what a production. Barry Lundy, we've talked about with the quarterbacks, has really improved the passing game. George McDonald did a great job of developing the talent that he inherited and adding talent to the room, and Illinois continues that. Pat Bryant going to take a role as a number one receiver, could be a breakout star this year, even though he's been productive the last 2 years, more than 1,000 yards and 9 touchdown catches over the last 2 years. But for me, Joe, it's easy. The big storyline of this room is Zakhari Franklin and just the impact of him coming in to Illinois to give you a proven player, but a really proven player. The NCAA's active leader in receiving yards. And I did a story today. You can go check it out at IlliniInquirer.com. There's buzz about Zakhari Franklin. Illinois continues to build. Illinois put out a clip today of Luke Altmaier threading a touchdown pass to Zakhari Franklin. But catching up with Luke, he said this guy just is a pro, basically. He gets leverage, he gets route running, efficiency. He just understands all the intricacies of how to be a good receiver at the college level, which guys like Malik Elzy and Kanari Wilcher and all these other, Ashton Hollins, they're all still learning how to do these things at the highest level. Zakhari Franklin knows how to do it, just like Pat Bryant. And then he's got some size at 6'1", 190. He's got some speed, but he is just a smooth, savvy player, and expectations are pretty high for Zakhari Franklin.
It felt like early on when he got to campus, it was kind of a slowly picked up speed, the hype train for Zakhari Franklin. And I feel like at this point in time, that train is moving very, very quickly. And I think it's going to probably catch more attention nationally. Like, that's a huge win. It's a huge win for Illinois to land him out of the transfer portal. Obviously, the connection he has, the success he's had with Barry Lundy. I know he briefly mentioned some of that yesterday, Jeremy.
Yeah, he did not quite. This is the first time. Like, Zakhari did not really want to do media. And when we got him for media day locally, Illinois actually got him out in front of cameras and microphones. And he didn't do the Marshawn Lynch, but his responses were usually one sentence. He did not want to elaborate on anything. He seems to want to let his play do the talking. He's a quiet guy from what I understand, but seems like he's assimilated well, and his teammates have been really impressed by everything he's done. So doesn't want to talk a lot, but that's fine. Illinois just needs him to catch a lot of passes and get a lot of yards and touchdowns.
Yeah, they didn't really bring him in here to be the chattiest guy in the world. They brought him in here to help elevate this offense, and by all accounts, he's going to do that. He's going to start opposite Pat Bryant. All of a sudden you're talking about, despite the losses that you had in the NFL, you're talking about a wide receiver room at Illinois, which we still have to put that on there, even though it's been much better in the last couple of years, a wide receiver room that I think you could reasonably look at it in that middle pack of the Big Ten going into the season with some room, obviously, for that either way to change, but that getting him just kind of settled everything else around him. And that, beyond what he can do on the field, and he's got a lot of catches and a lot of yards, and he's got a lot of talent. Settling down, kind of keeping everything comfortable in terms of roles, in terms of expectations, that is as much value to me as what he can do on the football field, and Illinois thinks that's quite a bit.
Because to be honest with you, if there were no Zakhari Franklin, I feel like the Malik Elzy hype train would have gone through the roof, and I just don't know if that would have been fair for him. Because I still think he's got some experience ahead of him that he needs to go through, some development that he's got to go in front of him, even though I think he could be a really impactful player, even as a sophomore. But now that's not necessary. Now, if one of the slot receivers is not good enough, Zakhari Franklin can play in the slot, right? And you could have Elzy out there, Capka Jones or Hollins or whatever it is. I was trying to think of a recent Big Ten comp for kind of what my expectation or how he plays would be. And the guy I started thinking about is Daniel Jackson at Minnesota. Franklin did not have a productive year at Ole Miss. It did not go the way he planned. Only played 4 games, had an injury, only had 4 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown. It did not go the way he wanted to because once he got injured, he fell down the depth chart. and they have a lot of talented players at Ole Miss. Jackson Dart is not hurting for targets to throw to there. And then he redshirted so he could preserve another year of eligibility so he could have a better lifting off point to the NFL. But I think of Daniel Jackson, he's 6 foot 195, not the fastest guy, not the most biggest guy, but he just gets open and he seems to make the catches when they're there. Last year, he had 59 catches for 831 yards and 8 touchdowns. Like, I don't know if Franklin hits those numbers. That wouldn't surprise me, though, Joey. Like, I think he's that kind of player, and Daniel Jackson's like an all Big Ten performer. I think Franklin can be that. So he's a 3-star transfer prospect, which I don't understand. I think they put too much into what happened at Ole Miss. He certainly has to prove himself at the Big Ten level, but we saw him produce against a pretty good secondary at Illinois 2 years ago, and he's done it against Texas and other programs. So this guy, almost every game, I feel like can give you 6 catches, 75 to 80 yards, and a touchdown. Like, I just feel like he's going to be that kind of presence and just gives Luke Altmaier somebody else he can trust.
Yeah, if you're going to perform at a Big Ten level, if you're going to take that jump into a higher level of college football, you want to do it alongside your coordinator that's helped you have some of the most productive seasons of your career. That's obviously a huge selling point. His versatility intrigues me. I know you mentioned it. If he moves into the slot, if there's I can't think of a combination that I'm more eager to see than Bryant, Elzy, and Franklin. I don't care how they line it up in that order on the field. I think that can do a lot for Illinois. I might have like an air horn in the press box the second they all go out there. Scare the hell out of everybody, and I can't wait to see it. Like that. That's a lot of talent. That's your wide receiver spot that you're putting out there.
Brett Mielma talked about it yesterday, just the size. Like he'd be really intrigued. And the thing about Franklin is if he's in that slot, you can move him around. But if you have a slot corner that's Tyler Strange size, he can box him out. Like, it'd be a quick slant, RPO style, which he crushed Illinois doing that. Like, that is really intriguing because you can find your matchup among those three. If Elzy can prove that he's got reliable hands, and go to whoever has the better matchup and target the most vulnerable corner. So yeah, that's really intriguing. We'll get into it. They still need some speed that they're going to throw in some packages, but certainly that's really intriguing. So I don't know if I have any more to add. Like, I just think he was such a monstrous ad for this offense in that receiver room, just because, as you said, just completely changes the roles of everyone else and gives Altmaier a chance to really take a step forward.
Yeah, I just want to see it, right? Like, I just want to see what this all looks like. And like, I feel like we're putting pretty high but fair expectations on the all-time active receiving yards leader in college football. Like, I don't think 75 to 80 yards a game is some unbelievable number, right? Like, you just want to see it and see how all of that pairs. Like, in this, Jeremy, and I'm sure this will be the segue into what we go into next, it feels like Pat Bryant's ready. Like, we've kind of, because Zakhari Franklin was such a big addition, and no one would ever argue otherwise, right? But because he was such a big addition, kind of feels like Pat Bryant's over there and people realize, like, hey, pretty good. He's been productive the last few years. But hey, look at this guy. Like, Zakhari's here. Dude, Pat Bryant seems ready to make that leap.
And that's what excites me about Zakhari. It's like, it feels like I have two guys, if healthy, that I can pencil in for 50 catches and 700 yards. Like, I feel confident that with the number of targets they're going to get, and it's not going to be, maybe it's not Isaiah Williams, juking and jiving and getting all the way to the end zone, or it's different, but I just feel like I can pencil those guys in for a huge amount of targets and a huge amount of production because they've proven it. Like, Pat Bryant has to go to another level, but he's going to get targeted more now. And I just feel like even if he continued what he did last year and just gets targeted more, so 750 yard receiver, potentially more. Like, these are two guys that will be in NFL training camps next year. And I have a lot of confidence in that. And think about that for Illinois. They struggle to get receivers in the NFL. They would have 4 in a 2-year span. Plus, you have some intriguing talent underneath them. So, yeah, I just feel like it's a really good duo and one of the more proven, better duos we've had for Illinois coming into a season. Last year, it was Pat Bryant and Isaiah Williams, and then Casey Washington just had this late surge. So it ended up being one of the best receiver cores we've seen in a long time for Illinois. But this year with Franklin and Bryant, it feels like even as proven as last year.
Yeah, Pat Bryant's always kind of had that swagger about him. You see him yesterday? He was walking around. He was kind of holding court inside the Smith Center yesterday, kind of walking around, like I would say, showing. I want that out of my number one receiver, that puff your chest out. I don't know that he necessarily talks a lot of talk, but kind of have that. Know that you're as good as you think you are, right? Like, feel like you're the best player out there. And like, I'm getting that vibe from him. I'm glad you mentioned Casey Washington, because listen, a year ago at this time on this exact podcast, we way undervalued. Like, I remember saying, hey, I think Malik Elzy is going to pass him up by October. Well, that didn't happen.
But if Malik Elzy would have played well, there was the opportunity. I know Washington had huge catches against Toledo and Maryland in those comebacks, but like, his production until the final 3 games was like, okay, solid, right? And then the last 3 games, it was just bonkers. And it just showed us, like, I didn't know Casey Washington had that in him. I didn't know he had that speed in him. Didn't know he had that playmaking in him. He just took it to another level. John Paddock helped him, but he got opportunities and he made the most of it. So I feel great for the Kings. I've always liked him, but yeah, I didn't see that last 3 games coming. The first 9 games, sure, we've seen stuff like that.
Yeah, he was always really toolsy, right? With the way his hands and his build took it to a huge level, which I guess that's my segue into Malik Elzy, a guy that.
Is this your X factor?
Yeah, because I feel like I know yours. You want to go with
I had 2 things written here, and one of them was Malik Elzy. So let's get into the Malik Elzy conversation, because he is a huge X factor, because we talked about this with Josh McCray. Like, these are the 2 guys that have the biggest spectrum of possibilities in this offense, that they could be big players or might not play a huge role and might not get that many yards by the end of the year. So I could see Josh McCray having a really great season, or being the 3rd running back and getting some touches. I could see Malik Elzy being a starting receiver, or I could see him being the 5th.
5th. 5th feels a little low. I don't know that I would go much. Like 4th, I could see, but like, is Capta Jones and Ashton Holland, are both of those 2 going to pass him up?
You have 2 slots in front of him too. I'm just thinking rep slot. Yeah,
sure. Yeah, I mean, there's a variance there, and I think I talked to Malik a little bit, and I hadn't transcribed it. It's been a busy night, Jeremy, and into the morning here. Last year at this time, he did not hide from what he wanted to do, and great, right? Like, set your goals as high. He didn't hide from it.
He told me, freshman All-American, 500 yards receiving, 5 touchdowns. Like, he had really high expectations for himself. And we all were. This is a kind of receiver Illinois hadn't recruited in a long time, with that size, that pedigree, that athleticism, and coming from Chicago. It's hard not to get excited about this kid, because he was physically ready to play.
Yeah, and I didn't, in talking to him yesterday, he didn't give off that same vibe, right? And it wasn't for a lack of confidence, because I don't think Malik Elzy's ever lacked confidence, right? Like, this guy he's a confident guy. I just think that he kind of realized, like, yeah, I'll go out there, and if this is what it's meant to be, my play will back that up. Like, it was just a different tone that I sensed from the freshman All-American talk he gave you a year ago. And again, I like that he doesn't have to be that right now. I would worry if he was the number 2, no doubt number 2 guy in this receiver room right now. If he can build into being that number 2.5 or 3, that's great, right? Like, that is great, because he's found his way into that. But he's so talented, Jeremy. And that's the thing. As you mentioned, Illinois hasn't recruited guys like him from Chicago, everything that goes into it. I asked him if he felt any. There must have been pressure to be Malik Elzy last year, right? You commit, and everyone's going nuts, because everything that he is as a football player, and he's a lot as a football player. Then you got to go out there and do it while you adjust to college. Like, it must have been a lot. He didn't really.
Right, he got here in summer.
He got here in the summer, and he didn't really jump into all of that, which is fine. I don't know that I necessarily expected it to. I still think there must have been a lot on his shoulders. I just, developing at a rate that's right is probably the most important thing in college football. Like, you in the NFL, right? You find any first-round draft pick quarterback on a terrible team, and they stink by like you going at the right rate. And I think Brett Bielema has a sense of that, and I think that's going to help Malik Elzy.
If he would have came here 2 years prior, right? If he were 2 years younger or older,
oh my God,
he would have played a ton, right? Yeah. Because he came into a situation where Pat Bryant and Casey Washington were really good. Isaiah Williams really good. Pat Bryant came in as a freshman, and I don't know if he wasn't more talented than Malik. I mean, they're similar kind of builds and everything, but he came in, got a role as a blocker, got to kind of work through some of his growing pains. Like Illinois didn't have to deal with that with Malik Elzy because they had two veteran options and they're pushing for a bowl game. I think he can be like Pat Bryant as a sophomore. As a sophomore, Pat Bryant had 34 catches, 453 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I can see that for Malik Elzy, but I also could see half of that. So I'm just interested to see how this all goes. But the biggest words you hear out of Justin Stepp, I talked to Kanari Wilcher about Malik, is he's just acting older. He's acting more mature, which is what becoming a sophomore is all about. You know what the deal is. You know how hard it is. And you know what you have to do to improve. So hearing those things is good because I heard he had an up and down spring, but he was targeted a lot in the spring game. 6 catches, 85 yards. Also had a couple drops that were costly. So I expect growing pains for him, but I think he's going to get more opportunities. He's growing up. So I'm still really excited about what he can become, but I'm happy the pressure of the world isn't on him to be the number 2 wide receiver.
Yeah, it's going to benefit him, right? It's going to benefit him this year. And if he turns out to be that Pat Bryant sophomore year or more than that, that's great for Illinois.
That's
right?
a wide receiver room.
That's right. If he ends up being that, and that's also part of the reason that that trio of receivers out there together at once intrigues me so much because I think there's so much talent you could possibly put out there.
And if Pat or Zakhari gets hurt, you have a guy that you know is talented enough to be a Big Ten starter, right? Like it's not like you're going to a guy who's not ready for this. Like Malik is a physical player. He can block. He can go up and get it. He's not the quickest guy, but he's just huge catch radius, physical. It's what you look for. So that's another key part there. The other part is the slots. There's a trio of guys. I got a piece coming out on Saturday morning about this competition. Hank Beatty, reliable, intelligent, really taking on a leadership role this year. He's really quick, but does he have that next level of playmaking? That's what we have to see. Can he be reliable in game situations now that he's going to take reps, but he's got experience. So I have no doubt he's going to be in the rotation. Kanari Wilcher for me is the guy that probably has the front runner for the starting job just because he's speedy. He's had experience. He's kind of been repping with the ones throughout the spring and summer and fall here. So I just feel like he can be that guy, and he's got that speed, has a little bit of size to him. The X factor in that whole competition is Mario Sanders, JUCO All-American, who is got more power to him, but also is really fast. So it feels like the upside with Mario Sanders is really intriguing, given how much he produced at the JUCO level. But he missed most of spring ball with a hamstring injury, so he's playing catch up here. But Brett Bielema, you asked him about him yesterday, Joey, and he's talking about like how intriguing he is. So maybe it's the return game. I still feel like Wilcher and Beatty have a heads up on him right now, but that's about as intensive a competition we have. It's been a very productive position, obviously, with Isaiah Williams. You're not going to get 82 catches and 1,000+ yards, I think, out of those 3 guys, but you do need that piece that can stretch the defense horizontally and stretch them and get over the top vertically and make some plays after the catch, because you have big physical receivers. Zakhari can get open, but can you have guys make plays after the catch? It's got to be this group.
Yeah, it does. And Kanari Wilcher, the speed is the most intriguing part with him. Obviously, got his feet wet last year, had some moments. He had a kick return that should have been, right, if not for a penalty on Tip Ryman. But that's an element that room doesn't have. They don't have that kind of that pure speed who can – maybe it's a jet, maybe it's a screen, maybe it's something that he can get the ball and go. Like that adds a dynamic to the room and to the offense that I think can really lift things. Mario Sanders intrigues me so much. Like if we were to project like mid-season depth chart movers and shakers, he would be up on that list for me as somebody who could make some noise and climb up as he gets acclimated, as he I'm sure there'll be snaps to get out there and understand the speed and everything that goes into making the junior college jump. But he's talented. He's productive. He's smart. Like those things I think will translate. I just think right now, as you mentioned, Beatty and Wilcher have been here. They've done it. They've got that experience in Barry Lunney's system. But if you were to – my mistake last year of thinking Elzy's going to pass up Casey Washington, if you were to say a guy who could come up and make some moves, it could be Mario Sanders, just getting his talent.
Yeah. All right, let's go right into it because I feel like this is a really interesting question because George McDonald deserves credit for for what he brought into the room. Who's your most intriguing long-term prospect out of this group? Let's take Elzy out of it because for me, he's still that. I still feel like, Pat Bryant's gone next year. Zakhari Franklin's gone next year. He could be your number one wideout. But who else do you want to add to this?
I'm still very intrigued by Colin Dixon. I don't know what that looks like. He's not the tallest guy in the world. I don't think he's a slot, but he's productive. He's built almost like a running back, Jeremy. He's a guy who was really, really productive in high school. You'll remember it was a good recruiting win for Illinois. After the coaching change at Wisconsin, his recruitment opened back up. And he's incredibly talented. We haven't seen him. I think we could see him this year.
6'1", 210, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, he's stout, man. He's built. Like there's a lot. He's very compact. Like I think there's ways you could use him, different formations, different ways to get him the ball. Is he going to be your typical X or Y? Like I don't know about that, right? But like I do know that he's productive. I do know that he can make plays. I think he's just got a lot of upside. And when that time comes for him, and I think it'll be a little bit this year, and I think it'll be a lot of it next year.
Yeah, he's fighting for a 2-deep spot right now. Now, does he beat out Ashton Hollins, Alex Kapka-Jones? I'm not sure. Hollins is 6'5". Like you saw some of these guys walk by us, like him, Tyson Rooks, and Kapka-Jones. I'm like, it's a really tall group. But Dixon has that power, has speed. Like he's got speed to him. I mean, we talk about Zakhari Franklin's versatility. What I loved about Colin Dixon as a prospect was that versatility. He's kind of that in-between guy that has some size, can win some jump balls, can get on top of a defense. But also, if you throw it to him on a drag, he can really make plays after the catch. And I do think he could play in the slot a little bit. And that's a big physical mismatch potentially in the slot. So as a redshirt freshman, he had a really good spring from everything we hear. So he really intrigues me a lot. And with Franklin gone, Pat Bryant gone, a lot of these guys are going to have to step up. So Elzy, Hollins, Colin Dixon, obviously Mario Sanders is going to be part of that group. Tyshawn Griffin's recovering from a torn ACL. I don't think he's going to play at all this year. And then Carlos Orr just got to campus. Big, physical. I think he's going to be a really good blocker. Kind of reminds me of Pat Bryant just a little bit. So there's some good young talent in this room. And then you got Braden Trimble. Talk about Zakhari Franklin. That's who Barry Lunny said he reminds him of. So I do think this is going to be a really, really interesting group next year, but might have to go back to the portal in 2025 just to give you another veteran option.
So if you got to go to the portal in 25, that I think you're probably going to have, you're going to have to go regardless. But I think this year is a good way to continue that pitch to some of those top end wide receivers in the transfer portal with what you think, in particular, Bryant and Franklin can provide.
All right, so depth chart, Pat Bryant, Zakhari Franklin solidifies as starters. Who is the third wide receiver on the field, Joey, when they start against Eastern Illinois?
I think it's still Kanari Wilcher.
I do too.
I mean, the only thing I would hold up on that is I know they like the reliability, the steadiness of Hank Beatty, but I don't think, and that's not to say Kanari Wilcher is like not reliable or not steady, but Hank, that's kind of been the vibe on Hank Beatty since he got here, right? It was all those things, but that speed's hard to pass up. It's just really, really hard to pass up.
All right, so rotation would definitely be Elzy, Hank Beatty. Then who would be if you
this is where it gets fun.
Yeah, who is getting the 6th and 7th rotation spots because they do want to keep these guys fresh and they feel like they have the depth to do so.
I think Mario Sanders is going to be that guy. Let's put him as one of those, even though it does worry me having 3 slot guys.
Yeah, he'd be stealing reps, I think, from Wilcher or Beatty.
Right. That concerns me just in the terms of projecting this out.
So let's go.
I'm stuck. I'm stuck after that. Is it Alex Kapka-Jones or is it Ashton Hollins?
Kapka-Jones had a hell of a spring game, man. 2 40-yard catches from Donovan Leary.
Brett Bielema's been screaming his name from the rooftops.
Everyone keeps talking about him. And I asked Justin Sepp about him. He said he's had a phenomenal camp because he has confidence now after the spring. It's a JUCO kid that his head was swimming when he got here. Like he camped and got an offer in June and then turned around the next week and showed up at Illinois. So it was a complete whirlwind for him. He needed to add strength, and I think he's done so. But talk about length. He's got some speed to him. and he seems to make plays down the field. So I think he can find a role. I'm just wondering, does that box out Ashton Hollins, who had good moments last year, incredible length, probably still a little raw as he was playing high school quarterback, but then Colin Dixon gives you that versatility as well. So I find that competition really intriguing for that third two deep spot, because they're going to play they're going to play 6 or 7 guys here.
Yeah, like we're talking about like a very intriguing competition for guys who are going to be targeted like 17 times this season, right? In that neighborhood. But it is interesting because if you're talking an injury, right? Or if you're talking that the desire to keep guys fresh, like when you lose an Isaiah Williams and a Casey Washington who played as many snaps as they did, like there's comfort. You're not taking Isaiah Williams off the field ever, unless he's like, hey, water, please. Like you're just not doing it because you're so comfortable with that guy. So you're kind of pausing, putting in your Hank Beatty's, your Kanari Wilchers, because why would you? Why would you take an all Big Ten first teamer out of there? And Casey Washington was so reliable. He was so good in the blocking game. And it's clear they didn't want to take him off the field. Like that rotation was a lot thinner, I think, than we might realize. Like you look back at how that shook out, that was a very thin rotation. They put a lot of trust into that top 3. And I get the sense that without 2 NFLers there, like obviously you have Pat Bryant and Zakhari Franklin, but I do wonder if that expands a little bit. Do they go more to your 6 guys? Do they dabble with the 7th guy this season? And those are the guys we're talking about. I don't know that I would pick anyone that we haven't mentioned to find their way onto that.
No, I don't think so. All right, expectations. How good can this group be?
This needs to be a top half of the Big Ten group. Like I say that, it's the 3rd time I've said it. I've said it with the running backs. I've said it with the wide receivers or with the quarterbacks. We haven't said this about wide receivers at Illinois in a while.
If we're talking about a top half of the Big Ten offense, you got to have a top half quarterback, running back, wide receiver, O-line, right? Like, so I don't disagree with that. I think the expectation should be that this could be one of the better duos of wide receivers at the end of the year. Like, I think Pat Bryant and Zakhari Franklin, if they stay healthy, my expectation between those guys would be 1,500 yards and 12, 14 touchdowns.
Pat Bryant's a huge body. He had a lot. What he had last year?
Last year,
yeah. I think that's fair. Especially, Jeremy, in the first half of this podcast, we talked about not having Cole Rusk. If it's not Henry Boyer in the red zone, if I'm Luke Altmaier, I'm finding Pat Bryant. Where is he lined up? What's his matchup? How can I get the ball to him? Malik Elzy is a good call on that. Right, yeah.
Yeah, and then those slot receivers, can they combine for 600, 700 yards? Malik Elzy, can he give you a couple hundred yards, or whoever those backups are? Because, listen, I think the running backs are going to play a big role in the passing game this year too, because I think you got 3 guys who can catch the ball. But I think you add up all the wide receiver yards, it should be over 2,000 this year. It should be over around 15 touchdowns, 14, 15 touchdowns. I feel like there's enough talent here, and there should be good competition to make those young guys better. So my expectations are pretty high based on what they did last year and based on adding a guy like Zakhari Franklin and just the natural progression of guys like Pat Bryant, Kanari Wilcher, and Malik Elzy. So maybe it's too high, but I feel like that's the expectation we should have, because Bryant and Franklin's production says that, and Barry Lundy's offense says these wide receivers should be pretty productive.
Bingo. That's the other reason my confidence is high, because their offensive coordinator is Barry Lundy. And for as much talk as, hey, they want to run the ball better, they want to do this, they do. All those things are true. They want to be more effective in that game. They're not going to stop throwing. And this offense has potential to be able to move the ball through the air in better ways than we've seen them do it. I don't want to say before, because it's pretty good last year, but in a way that can match or exceed a season ago or 2022. So I believe in the play caller is going to give them opportunities to go out there. They've got the talent to do it. I pulled up your position primer from earlier in the spring, Jeremy, which was written before they officially landed Zakhari Franklin, and Phil Steele does a great job, right? But just to put a reference point on how much I think the perception of this group has changed, Phil Steele ranked Illinois 17th of 18th prior to landing Zakhari Franklin in the Big Ten. That's not a knock on Phil. His book's very, very good. Everyone get your hands on it because it does a good job of looking at college football. I don't know that would be the same ranking at this time right now.
No.
But like that position just adding him is going to elevate that and kind of where they stand in the conference. Now you got to go out and do it and all that and all the coach speak that goes along with that. But expectations should be high because they've set those expectations, or at least I've gathered that they have fairly high expectations for themselves.
When you mentioned they're going to keep throwing the ball, last year they threw for 3,175 yards. I don't think they have to throw as much as they did last year. I think they're going to run the ball a little bit more. I do think there's going to be a little bit more balance. But even 2 years ago, right, they threw for a lot of yards. Now, a lot of that quick passes to the slot, I think those quick passes now could be to Pat Bryant and to Zakhari Franklin in the RPO game. So I think it's just going to look a little bit different because you have a different group of receivers. But I still expect a lot of production and those yards. I mean, Tommy DeVito in that year, that team threw for 2,753 yards. So there's going to be some big production from these receivers. And I expect Franklin and Pat Bryant to be two of the more productive receivers in the Big Ten. I would be almost shocked if they're not two of the top 20 for sure, but they could be two of the top 15, two of the top 12.
Yeah. And I think I think Barry Lunny's a good offensive coordinator. Obviously it was rocky earlier in the season last year, but it really solidified late. And I think good coordinators find their way to adjust and to reimagine what they want when you lose that talent. When you lose an Isaiah Williams and Casey Washington, Barry Lunny's giving me confidence that he can, regardless of the personnel, the output is going to be in the same neighborhood year to year, right? With some variance both ways. But I think he's proved that, or at least given me the impression that he can do that. And then you combine the fact that this is talented. Why wouldn't you put expectations as 7th in the Big Ten, 6th in the Big Ten, somewhere between 6 and 8 feels right to me for what I think this group can be.
All right. You got any final thoughts on wide receivers and tight ends before we get out of here?
Did Captain Jones still have the mustache?
I think so. I think he told me that he grew out the mustache and then he started playing well at the JUCO level and then he got offers. So he wasn't going to shave it. Like it was his Samson power.
Oh, I hope he still had it. I can't believe someone cuts the hair, you're all over. They trim their facial hair, it's over your head.
Donovan Leary still has the hair, by the way. Saw that yesterday.
Thank God.
Still has that.
That's the biggest thing to take away from yesterday is Donovan Leary did not cut his hair.
Or Matt Krasevich.
Yeah. Matt Krasevich, very, very good hair.
Yeah.
Very good hair.
I don't know how I would look with that hair, but
it would be exceptional.
There's a lot of it.
I wish you could do it.
And the curls are just
today I'm going to start ending the pod with Luke Altmaier mullet updates.
Yeah.
Improving.
Yeah.
I told him, I said, listen, like Matthew Meyer had some great clip stuff. Like there's money in the hair here for Luke Altmaier. I don't know if he's going to maximize that, but mullet update day 1, pod 1, looking good.
The vibes with Altmaier really good. I caught up with him.
You noticed it too, huh?
Really relaxed and all about like chatting about Zakhari. Like he'd already been done with all his media, and I went up to him and asked him, and it was great.
I noticed that, and I didn't even interview him. I just kind of passed by him, and we sat and talked for a second. And I wrote it. We noticed it in the media scrum. It's a good way to close this out as we circle back to the quarterbacks again, Jeremy. But it just feels different. It does with him. His personality feels different.
Yeah, and I just give Illinois a lot of credit. Barry Lunny and Art Sikowski and the work they've done, Brett Bielema, the work they've done with him, the relationship they have, because that wasn't easy going through what they went through last year. But also they surrounded him with talent to succeed. And Zakhari Franklin's a big part of that. You hoped Cole Rusk was, but that offensive line we'll get into in our next podcast. I think we'll do O-line special teams next because then we can put D-line and outside linebackers together, which is where they belong.
I'm glad we went that route because when you said the trenches together, I thought, we can make that work. But the O-line is going to take us roughly 92 minutes to get through.
I know me, right? And O-line, D-line combined would have been like an hour and 45. So,
yeah, I'm glad we're not doing that. I don't know. Especially we've done these mid-mornings and I get really hungry. So about this point in time, I'm not interested in Jeremy's 7th stanza on the defensive line.
My breaking down the second string offensive line battles. I love this stuff. All right. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a follow, rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube. Hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit the notifications bell. For Joey Wagner, I'm Jeremy Warner. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.